Good evening, everyone. I'm Muhammad and my colleague Mu'taz. We'll start the second session. First one was introduction. In this session, we will start with the React basics, the first part, inshallah. Just remove it. Okay. During the session, we will talk about. We'll start by creating a new project. We'll talk about project structure. What are the files inside each project? What's the benefit of each? We will talk about class and function components, the two types of components. We'll talk about how to use props to pass data between parent and children components. And we will talk also about state and useState hook, inshallah, during this session. We will start by talking about project structure, but before I start with this, let me project with you because it takes some time. So let me start by creating a new project. I'll go to a directory, React projects. Yeah, it's just a folder I have created before, and I'll just create a new app. Will write npx create React app. Then the name of the app, let's call it React Basics, and hit enter. Okay, it will just start downloading some data and installing some dependencies. We'll talk about this later, inshallah. Now, in our project, we have when we will create the project, when it starts, we will see on the left this for the project. Okay. Now, the first one is node module. It contains the dependencies. The dependencies of the project, the installed dependencies of the project. While the package.json contains the list of dependencies that is used in the project, which means node modules contains a lot of dependencies used and not used. We can use them, but mainly we will use only the dependencies that we need, the package that we need. Okay, and this the package that is needed in our project is defined in package.json. We will see them inshallah soon. We will see also what's in the index.html, index.js, and app.js. Our main work will be inside app.js. Index.js contains some things about, let's say, metadata and CSS library and such things. But the main thing is the root div inside the index.html. Now, this root div is used to create an element inside index.js. And this element, the first component, the root component, which is called app component, is this one. That the one we will use and create a lot of components inside it. Let's say React basically is a tree of components. Let's say infinite number of components nested inside each other, interacting with each other. Okay, let me see. Yeah, that name is not working. Okay, let me try another name. Create React app. Let's call it my session. Come on. Come on. Okay, create React. Yeah, there can't be letters. My bad. Yeah, app, my session, like this. I'm sorry, my bad. Can't contain a capital letters. Yeah. Okay. Okay, now until it finishes creating the project, we'll continue here with the project structure. We'll talk about the other folders. We have app.css and index.css CSS both contains global styling. We will talk later, inshallah, about what's the difference. Why do we have add CSS and index.css? Why they are different, since they are all both global? Okay. For the app.test.js, it allows us to test units. In case you have talk in the university, I don't know if you have talk or not. Testing, a course about how to create tests and such things. We will, even if you don't know about it, inshallah, if we reach it. And for report vital, it's used to measure performance. Inshallah, also, if we have enough time, we'll talk about how to see what's the problems inside your project, how to create a project with best practices, let's say. Okay. Now for Fav icon, and let's say it's the icon that's the React icon mainly. It's used in manifest.json, and these two files are used when you create a new project. It's not important. The only thing that's the most important thing here is the app.js, and we should know how app.js gets its data. It appears to take some time. So let's go to the next slide. We'll talk about it in theory. Once it's created, we will just start practicing. By the way, to create a project now, NBX create React app, and the name of the project. It's good to do it now, so you can practice with us. So after this, we will talk about what are the components. Okay. Now React component, it's, let's say it's the block that builds React. Okay. We have many components in our website. Each website can contain many components, and each component contains it's let's say a state. There is interaction between components. So let's say let's say how to define a component, how to create a component. Okay. Now we have two types of components: a class component and a function component. Class component is basically a component that is created as a class. Okay. It's a class. Let's say the first application, the first component here, which is app extends component, and it contains render method, and this is very important. In a class component, it contains render method. Okay. But in function component, it doesn't contain render method. It just directly returns. Okay. Both contains return, but in a class component, it contains also render method. In order to use the extends component, because we are using some utilities of component here, we have to import it from React also. And as we mentioned before, that the export and import, inshallah, we will talk about them, inshallah, while we are practicing. But mainly here, it says export default app, which means if I import anything inside this file, the app component will be imported as the main component, because it's the default component here. Same thing here, export default person. The main component here is called person. Okay. Now, when I import this component inside any other component, the main thing will come to me is when I render this is the person component. Okay. Even if there's other components here, but the default one here is the person. Okay. Anyway. Okay. I guess there's small problem here. I don't know why it stopped already. But anyway. Okay. Now, in case you have not created this project, start creating it now. We will take just 2 to 3 minutes until it finished creating this project. inshallah, and we will continue with how to create the components, inshallah. Yes, you can create the project like this with no need with the script. I mean, for now, it's okay to add it, but for now we'll use it without scripts version. It's just a dependency for us. But yeah, you can create it with this, like with this command. So here we go. When it says happy hacking, it's done. Okay. Now, how to start with my project? I will basically just go to the project that I have created. So cd my session, and I will just start npm start here. It will load for just a second, and it will start the project in localhost at the port 3000. Okay. Now let's go and open our project. Mm, my session here. Let me just open it with Visual Studio. As I have mentioned, this is the project that we have created, the same structure, and let's start now. Okay, now in our index.html, it contains, as I have mentioned, metadata about the project and some CSS and other things that's related. Just don't change them for now. We'll not talk about them now. But our main thing here is the div, which have the ID root. Now this div, which has the ID root, be replaced with a React component, which is created here. It will be the React DOM will render the application instead of the document.get element by ID, the root div, which means this application component will be instead of the ID, the div with ID root. Okay, so we don't need to do anything here or here. It's already configured. Okay, what we have to start doing is inside app.js. Everything will be almost here. Okay, now inside our app.js, we will see as a function with a function component, as I have mentioned, and a div with the class name app and other things inside, which defines this Spring logo. Okay, we'll just remove them now, and I'll just write. Let's say here, paragraph contains hello world, and let's see it, and we can see it's working here. Okay, now as we have mentioned that this component is the main component. Okay, and I have mentioned that we have two types of components: function component and app component. Let me just remove this one from the import. I don't want something to be unnecessary here. Okay, we have function and app and component. This is written in function component. Okay, if I want to write it in a more modern way, I will write it like this. I will write this const app equals, and here we will pass anything that we want to pass as argument, I think, and it will return this function style, which is return. And okay, now this is DS6, and by the way, I'm using two extensions here, prettier. The first extension is prettier. See it here, and the first extension is prettier, and the second extension is 7 React. You can install them. It will take on seconds, so you can follow it. Okay, now we have talked that this is the first component that we have in our project. We have also said that we can create a function component, and it will be like this. Okay, let me create it. Let me create another component. Okay, now to create components, we will do the following. We will create just to do it as a best practice. Each component should be inside a folder alone. Okay, it works if you just throw them anywhere. It will work. It's not wrong. Everything will work. But as best practice, we will create them inside each component inside a folder, so that I know if there is something wrong with any component, I will go to that folder. So to create the first component, let me call it class comp. You can call anything. It's a folder, okay? And inside that folder, let me create my component. So it's a good thing. Also, it's a best practice to name the component the same thing as the folder name. So when you import anything, you know that this is the component inside that file. Okay, and for the extension, we can write here JSX. As you can see here, the logo here will change if I write JS or JSX. Both will work, both correct, nothing is wrong. Okay, but for me, I will go with JS as everything here is written in JS, so I will just go with it. Okay. Now, create our first class component. This one, as I have mentioned, is a function component. To create a class component, we have to import React and component from React. Now, what I have is IMRC shortcut. This shortcut is from extension that I have mentioned. This one. Okay. It will just make it easier to import React and component. Another thing, I can just remove this and RCC. I mean, yeah, it will create a class. Okay, its name is the exact name as the folder name, so everything will be correct here. Okay. Instead of writing export class here, I will just write it in the bottom. It's correct, both correct. Nothing is wrong. But I like to write it in this way, so that we have this class component. Okay, extends component from React, and it renders the return, and the div is empty. Let me just add something here. Let me add paragraph tag with hello. I am class component, and Okay, if I now save everything and go here, I will not see anything. Why? Because the only thing that works is the app.js. Everything inside app.js. So how do I use other components? It will be useless if I can't. Of course you can, and that will be by calling them inside the app component. Now, to call any component inside the app component, first of all, you have to import it. So let me import this class component. As I can see, it's import class component from the folder class component. Then the component itself is called the class component here. Okay. So and then I can use it. Okay. Now I can use it, but it's a best practice also to make the first letter capitalized here in the component name. Why is that? Because all the let's say the tags inside HTML. By the way, this is GSX. I will mention that later, inshallah. All the tags inside HTML starts by a small letter. Okay, but all tags inside I mean, I'm sorry. All components starts with capital letter to make it, let's say, to make it easier to differentiate between them. Okay. Now here I can see the div tag here. Okay, let me just try it with you. Okay, I can see this div, and as I can see, it's colored with blue, which means it's HTML. I like this one. Okay, now if I write div the same thing with capital, we'll see it as a React component, not as a div. That's why if there's something that's the same name as another HTML tag, it will be. I mean, the program will, the React will not recognize it as a component, but it will recognize it as a normal tag. That's why we start here always with a capital letter. Okay, so let's start here with class component. I can make it as normal tag, or I can make it as self-closing tag. Both correct. Okay, let me just leave it like that. Okay, now if I save, I can see here that hello, I'm class component, which is from this one. If I change anything here and save, it will be changed. Okay, which means that this component is now let's see. Okay, in this way, it's not useful to use a component if there is only just static things. I can just write it here, hard code it here, and that's it. No need to create components. But that's why I mean, in creating components, first of all, facilitates the work for us. Let's see here that this is a component and this is another component. If I see any problem here with this component, I know directly that the problem is from the class component, not from here. Which means if I want to, if I want to fix any error, I will just see it here. Okay. Okay, that's how to create a class component and a function component. Let me create another component quickly. Function component. Let me call it function component. Oops. Anyway, let me just make it computer. Create a file. Also function component. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot the extension. Yeah. Yes. Now, to create a function component, the only thing I need is to create the function itself. So we'll import the React itself, just import it without component. It's if you leave component, it will not fix anything, but I mean, no need for it. Okay. So to create a function component, first I will just create, let me just pass the name of the component, which is function comp. After that, I will use the ES6 syntax. I will use, there's no argument here, and it will start the function. Let me export it here, export defaults, the function comp. And here I will just pass the return, okay, and it returns some div or something, and there's semicolon here. Now I can write here, let me add here paragraph tag, I am a function component. Okay, and I will use it the same way as I have used the class component. I will import it, function component, and I will use it here as function component. But let me leave it this time with the not self-closing tag, so that both are working. Okay. Now. Okay, now let's talk about how to before talking about how to printing dynamic content. First of all, why are we returning a div always? There's always a div that there's something inside it. I can write another thing inside it and it will work. It will work, okay? But if I write anything outside this, let me just say this. Yeah, it will show me an error. Why is that? The first rule while writing a React code is that when creating a component, it returns only, or let's say, one tag wrapping other tags. Okay, so there's always only one tag that wraps all the things inside it. Okay, all the JSX code inside it. Or let's say HTML, but it's actually JSX. So what's the difference between HTML and JSX? There's small differences between them. The first thing that I can return a JSX code, while in HTML there is nothing. There is no relation between HTML and JavaScript other than I can write scripts inside HTML, but I can't return some HTML codes. Okay. Another thing that it's called JSX because it's script XML, which means the XML code, which is HTML-like notation code, wrapped in a JSX, in JavaScript. And there's small differences, like when I create a class, I can't just write a class, okay? It will not show error, but it will not work. If I do assigning for it, it will not work, okay? Instead, I have to write class name. That's the first difference. Okay. One other difference, instead of writing on click, I have to write it on click. So as you see, it's small differences. We will talk about them when we reach them. But for it's small differences that's not even noticeable. Okay. So we can say it's HTML, although it's not. Okay. But it's like HTML. Okay, let's go back to our point where we talked about how to print dynamic content. Okay, now let's say that I want in this component to define a variable. Let's say x equal 5. So if I write it here, x equal 5, and I try to use it inside this component, it will not be able to use it because it's outside the component. Okay. Okay, let's see if I write it before the render method. Let x equal 5. It will show me an error that you can't write JavaScript codes here. You can't use let here. You can use x equal 5. That's it. Okay, but you can't write some JavaScript definitions here. Okay, which means here we can define other functions, like let's say switch name handler, some function. Okay, and it will be JS6 function, and it will work. Nothing is wrong here. Okay, and I can use this function inside the return, inside the render, both. Okay, so there is nothing wrong by writing functions here, methods here, let's say, and later we will see the state. It will be written here also, but I can't define something. I can't say like const and then the function name. It will not work. It will show me an error. You can't define a function here. Okay, but you can use some functions. But where you can define inside before the return, inside the render before the return, for the function component, you can define before the return also. So inside the component itself, you can say here let x equal 5, and also here you can say let x equal 2 maybe. Okay. Okay, how to use this X now? Let's do another tag here. Now, to use any dynamic content, maybe variables, functions, anything that's not static content, I can just type X here, okay? It will not show me the value of X, it will just show X, okay? Which I don't want to show X here. Let me say here X equals, and I want to show the value of X here. Now, to show any dynamic content inside React, you have to wrap it inside curly brackets, okay? And then you have to write the name of the variable here, okay? So in this way, you can see that this value here is 2, which is this one. The same thing we can do inside the function component. Let me just write it here. It's exactly the same thing, and it shows the value that's inside the component itself. Okay, now that's for the dynamic content. We can also use functions. Let me just use here math.random, maybe, function, multiplied by 10 or something, or 100. It's okay, it's just a function of a vanilla function. I can use it, and I can see it's a value. I can refresh it, will be another value here. Okay? For now, let's leave it as X, the one that's defined here. And again, using curly brackets means that you will add some dynamic content inside it. Okay. Now let's move to how to use props. Or first of all, now I'm calling these functions, these components here. Let's say I have, let's say here, maybe let name equal Muhammad, and I want to pass this name to the class component. How do I do that? Inside the class component, when I call it, I will write the value that will be used there. So let me just say my name. I can write anything here, okay? And this name that I'm giving here will be used inside the component itself. Now, as we say to use dynamic content, we have to wrap it inside the which in this way, I'm passing this name to the component. Let's also pass the same name to the function component, okay? Let's go now to, even enough. We have to use it there, okay? We have to receive it. Inside the function component, I have to specify that I want to receive something. Inside the class component, no, I don't have to, okay? So inside the function component, I have to write here, I want to receive props, okay? Now using this word is common when creating using that. It's common to use the word props as arguments that sent the functional component. And that's because of when using it inside the class component. Let me just use it here. Let's say the best name is, when using it inside the class component, I have to use this dot props, and then I have to specify which one, and this one is my name here, okay, my name. And by the way, use this, I mean, I can use as many as properties as I want to pass, and it will all be passed, okay, to other components. Now let's go here and receive it also. It will be, let's say the name is, and it will be props dot my name. Now the difference between this and this is that we are using this keyword here before props dot my name, but here we are passing the props. We are telling the function that we are using props in this function. We want to receive something, and we are using props dot the thing that we passed, okay? And as I can see here, for the class component, the name is here, and for the function component, the name is here. I can change it, and it will take the effect. As I can see here, it's Ahmed. Okay. Now this This is how to pass props to other components. Let me just pass another thing. Age equal. I can make it. It's 28 maybe, and I want to pass it here. I can name it the same thing also. It doesn't make a difference. It will work. Okay, and I will pass the age here, and in the class component I will go and use it. He is. Let's use it. This dot props dot age, and it will work correctly. Just showing you that I can pass multiple props, not just only. I can pass even arrays. I can pass even references to something. Okay, if I have function here, I can pass the reference of that function, so that when this reference is triggered, the function will be triggered. We will talk about this inshallah soon. Okay, now that's for the props. But why do we have sometimes we have a self-closing component? Sometimes we have not self-closing. I can pass here something inside this between the first and the starting and the closing tags. I can pass here. Let's say my hobby is to eat, maybe. Okay, and I can. Okay, now it's passed to the function component. Okay, but here I can't see it. I can just see class component with x, bus name, age, and function component x, bus name, age. But I can't see it. Let me just make this as instead of let me make it h1 so it's more clear the difference between them. Okay, yeah. Okay, but I can't see it now inside the function component. I have passed it here, but I didn't receive it here. Now to receive anything between the starting and the closing tags of the component, I have to use something called children. Okay, props.children. Okay, and it will be used in this way. Let me just print it. Props children. Sorry, children. Yes, and as I can see, it's here. Okay. Now, this is reserved, children is reserved, okay? And the name props is reserved only for class components. It's not reserved for function components. I can change the name here and I use it here, it's okay. And if I want to use the same thing, props children here, I can use it, this props children, the same thing, just I have to add this inside the class component. That's how to use the props inside React. Now let's move to another reserved property in React, which is called state. Now, passing data between the parent, let's say this one is the parent component, and the child components requires using props. But what if I want let's say, to have a state for each component? Maybe I want something to change inside that component only. Or maybe I want something that's related to this component. Only this component can affect it, unless it gives the permission to other components to affect it. Okay, so and this is called the state. Now we have two types of state. We have a state and a user state. State is used inside class component. User state is used inside function component. Let's start with the easier one, which is state inside the class component. Let me go here inside the render method. I'm sorry, before the render method. Using the state requires to be the first thing inside the class. Okay, it's not like I can't define anything before it, but I can't define it inside the render. It can't be after the render or inside the render. I mean, it should be outside the render method, inside the class component. Okay. Now to use a state of the component, we have to write it like this. The state is an object, by the way. So I have to wrap it inside object curly bracket. Okay. Now I can define anything I want here, and it will be defined in this way. Let's say I have maybe book. Okay, and I will say 100 swords, and let's say number of pages. Let's make it 520. Okay, and now this state is only inside this class component. I can pass its values to other components for sure, but changing any value of this state should be from this component only, which means if I want to change anything inside it, I create a function here inside this component, and I can call this function from anywhere, of course, but the function should be here only. Okay. Now this state, as I have said, it's a reserved, let's say, a reserved property in React. What makes it special? The thing that makes it special is changing anything inside the state will re-render the DOM of the website, which means it will change the content, of course, without doing a refresh, but it will change the content of the things inside. Let me just let me go here and break. I'll just do this. Anyway, let me go here and use the values of this state. How to use the values of state? Make it match to so it's clear to you which values. Now, let's say the book name is. I will use curly brackets. Of course, I'm using dynamic content. So use the values of the state. I have to this state. But the thing that I want to write, let me say book. Okay, this will the name of the book, this one, and it has yes dot state dot number of pages. Now I can have arrays here. I can have objects inside the state. I can have anything inside the state. Numbers, booleans, objects, strings, anything that I can define. It can be defined inside the state, and I can use it this way. Okay. Now, if I refresh now, if I save, I will see the book name is 100 swords, and it has 520. Let's say here pages. Ignore this one. It's from Prettier extension, just to make it clearer, but it's not a thing. It has, yeah, okay. Yeah. So as I can see that I can use the values of state. Now, changing anything from this state requires a special method also, requires a special function also to be triggered. Let me just add the button here. Okay, yeah, add button, and let me name it switch name. Okay, I want this button to switch the name of this book. Okay, now to use it to make it working, to make it switching the name, first of all I have to tell him what this button will do. It will triggers a function. So let's define this function. Let me call it switch name. Okay, it's an ESX function, which means I will use this syntax. Now, changing anything inside the state requires using set state. And I'm talking here about it here is the inside the class component, not inside the function component. Function component is something else. Okay. Now, using changing anything here requires using set state. Yes, and it will be called like this. This dot set state. Of course, let me tell you something. Of course, changing. Let me say this dot state dot book. Make it 200 swords. Using this will not work, of course, and it will even show an error. And that's because if it's another variable, it will work, of course. But because it's the state is here, the special object here, it requires a special function to change its contents, and this will be this dot set state. Okay, it's a function that accepts an object. Let me make this object, and this object will be merged with the old object. Okay, which means that if I say here book, make it 200 swords, just changing the book, it will change only the book name here. It will not affect the number of pairs here. Okay, this means that it merges the new state, the new defined state with the old state. We will talk later about the function component inside it. We use a useState hook there, and it will not merge, it will replace. Okay, and we will talk about it inshallah soon. Let me just finish this one. Now, how to call a function inside React? To call a function, let's say inside the button, I will make it triggered by the click, on click equals. For, of course, I can't just write the name of the function here. I will have to make it inside the curly brackets, and I will pass the reference of this function, which is using this dot switch name. Okay. Now, one important thing is that I can't do the brackets here. It's a function, yes, but I can't do this. And we will talk later about why we can't do this, inshallah, in the next session, maybe, or after it, we'll talk about why we can't use this. Why we just only pass only a reference. We pass only a reference of the let me say the function, the method. Okay. We will inshallah talk about what are the other options here, but not now. Let's just stick to using a reference of that function. I go now here, as I can see, it's 100 swords. If I switch, it's 200 swords. Okay, I can change it to ABC, and it will change. I can. It's ABC. Okay, as I can see, changing the state in this way requires using this dot set state. Changing anything inside the state requires using this dot set state. Now let's say that I want to use this, or let's say I want to use this function instead of another component. Okay, let me just say that I want to use this function inside the function component. Now, of course, it okay. I can call the function component here, of course. It's okay to call any component inside any component, but just be aware that it's not a good thing to call the app component inside components. Let's just leave it as the root component for us. Okay. Now let me just pass the name of this function here. Let me just call the argument that I will pass in it. Call it click, maybe anything. I can write anything here. Okay. Click will contain the reference of this function, which is switch name. Now I can go here inside this function component and use inside the button. I will use I'm sorry. Let's call it switch, and I will use here on the on-click event. It will call the function that's passed to it, and its name is the click. Let me change its name so it's not confusing. We call it ABC maybe. Okay, so it's passed as. Now I can use it here in the on-click function as probs.abc. I'm just passing the reference. This will refer to this one, and this refers to switch name, which triggers this one. Which means clicking on this button will trigger this function and change in this state. That's what I have told you before, that I cannot change the state of this function only the state of this component, only inside this component. I can change it from outside by using a function inside this component. Okay, if I save, I can see switch here. It's quite because I'm writing function component inside the root component. We use it here. Okay, as I can see, it's ABC. Okay. and that's it. Okay, let me just remove this so it's not confusing for you, although it's mentioned in the slides that I have given to you. Okay. Now we have talked about how to use a state inside the class component. Let's use it now in component. Okay. Inside the function component, I have to use it in a different way. As we have mentioned a concept that called destructuring in the first session, we will use this concept now. Now to use a state inside the function component, I have to first of all define what are the things. Now let's just say that we will use a hook that called useState. Okay. Now this useState of course need to be imported here. Okay, but the extension imports it for me. So I have to use this useState hook. Okay, useState hook provide for me a state. Now I don't know what's the name of this state or how to change it, and that's why useState returns two values. It returns an array with two values only. The first value is the name of the state, and the second value is the method that changed this state. Okay. Now inside the class component, I can use only one state and only one state here. Okay. But inside the function component, I can use as many states as I want. I can use state for box, state for maybe persons, state for whatever. But in class component, I have to merge them all inside one state. Okay. Both are correct, but using this will make it easier to understand what each state contains. Okay. Now, as I have mentioned, that use state contains returns two values only. Now we have to save these values inside. Yes, inside two variables. Okay. Let me call the first. Now, it's a best practice to here is to the first one will be of course the name of the state as I have mentioned, and the second one will be the function that's used to change anything inside this state exactly. Okay, so I will use the destructuring concept here. Let me call it here. Let's say trees state, and the function will be set trees state. Now this name here and this name here is up to you. Of course, you can change it as you want, but the point is that usually when we use any name here, and you will see it maybe when you work in React, usually you see that the function name is the same name of the state, but with set before it, so that you know that this function refers to this state. It's not confusing. You can see that if I use set tree state, of course it will refers to tree state. Okay. And let me say here tree name, maybe set it to first tree, and the height, maybe let's set it to 10 foot or something. And yes, like this. Okay, now we have the state. We have defined the state like this. Okay, in this way, we define this any state we want. We can use multiple states here. We can create a lot of states as much as we want. But let's just stick to this state for now. Okay. Now, how to change this state? Of course, we have also to use a function. Let's now define a function. Now, the difference here is that we can define a function with const here. Okay. Const, let's say switch name. Or let's switch tree name. Okay. And this function we will use the ES6 syntax. It will be like this. Now, it's a good thing to mention that inside the class component, I can use anything here. I can use const here, const x, let's say y equal to, okay? I can use const here. So anything before return, I can use, but it should be inside the render method, okay? So we will use that here, as there is no render here. So it's all inside the function before the return. I will just define a function here called it switch tree name. Okay. Let me, of course, I can't just say tree state tree name equals something. It will not work, of course, because it's a state, it's a special thing. It needs to be set using a method. And that's what I will do here. I will use this method that I have passed its name here. So set tree's name. So it knows that I want to change anything. I want to change something inside this state. Okay. And let's pass an object inside it. Let's just pass a new tree name. This tree name, let's call it second tree. Okay. As I have done here, it's a book, and I have changed the book name. Now let me just add a button here. And call it maybe switch tree. And this button should have a reference for this function. And to make this, let's make it triggers when we click on it, and it calls switch tree name. So I will just call this dot switch tree name. But in class component, on a click, we use this dot something, this dot state, this dot state. The difference is that in function component, because we are using ES6 syntax, and we have mentioned that in the previous lecture, that when using ES6 syntax, you don't need to use this keyword. And that's why we are just using the reference without any this here. It just resolves the problem of this. Basically, it makes it easier to you. You don't just need to use this. Don't use it. Okay. Now, this function changed the name. And let me just print the values of the state here. So we see how everything's changed. Tree name, let's say, is side curly bracket. I want to use to print the values of the state here. So I have to refer to the state name, first of all, trees state. Then I have to choose whatever I want. Let's choose here the tree name. And it is, let me pass here the height, trees state dot height, let's say foot. Okay. Now if I can see here that, yeah, tree name is first tree and it's 10 foot. Now if I switch the tree, notice that we have two values here, first tree and the 10 foot. If I switch, yeah, it's a second tree, correct, but there is, why this is erased? If I now not this 10, okay, when I just click the button, there's no number anymore. Why is that so? It's because that when using set state inside the class component, it mirrors the new things with the old things, which means number of pairs is not affected, but the book name is affected. Okay, but it's not the same inside the function component. In the function component, when I use set the state, when I use this function set state, it replaces the old state with the new state. Now, one solution is to write it, of course, to write the previous one, 10. And of course, it will work now. Let's try it. If we refresh, it's first tree and 10 here. Switch, second tree and 10 here. That works, but it's not the best solution, or let's say it's not the best practice here. Okay, the best practice here is to use another concept we have talked about, is the spread concept. We copy the contents of the previous state, then we change the contents as we want. Okay, we don't just change the contents without copying the previous ones. So if we have a lot of variables here, we don't need to hard code them again. And if something changes, I have to change it again. It's not efficient to do that. Okay, it's efficient to do like this. It will copy this three dots will copy the contents of the previous project object, and it will then we will change whatever we want inside that object. Now, if we see here, let me refresh it here. Yeah, first tree and 10 feet. Now, if I switch second tree and 10 feet, it's working. Okay. Um, as I have mentioned, it's very important that in class component, we don't setting the state does not mean that we replace state with the new state, but it means that we merge the states together. But in the function component, when we use function component, using set state or the function that we change, we set its name here, will replace the new. We replace the old state with the new state. Okay. We have reached the limit of time today. So that's it for today. I guess I have covered everything that I want. I guess yes. Let me just write another state here so that you know that it's for you only. Let's just make another quick state here. Person state. And let's make it here set person state. It's not necessary, but it's a good practice so that if anyone reads your code, knows that what you are doing. Okay, let's make it here name Ahmed, maybe with age, or let's say weight. Is that so? Let's set it to maybe 120 kilograms. And like this, we can have many states. There is no error with having many states. We can use any of them. It's okay. And we can use its functions as we want. It's also okay. But inside the class component, if I want to do so, I have to write it here, name here, and such things. I can't add another new state here. So that's it for the session today. If you have any question, please ask us. If there is something that's not clear, we still have like 5 minutes. So yeah. If you have any question, please ask us. And if you don't, we have finished. We have all of these slides mentions the same thing that I have said. Okay. So you can, I will them on the link also. I will send the link again of the drive. Another thing that the codes that we have written inside this, we will also be provided on the link as well. So if you don't have any question, you are free to go. And that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed the session.